Before the cities of the prairie rose, there was the forest. Across Michigan's lower peninsula stood an ocean of white pine, tall, straight, and seemingly without end. Its timber was light enough to float, soft enough to work, and strong enough to last. To the men who first saw it, it looked like a fortune that could never run dry. At the edge of this green sea sat a sleepy bend in a river where the waters of the Muskegon emptied into Lake Michigan. For generations, it had been a fur trading post, a quiet place known mostly to the Ottawa and the voyageurs. But the river was the key. It reached deep inland, straight into the heart of the pinelands. In the 1830s and 1840s, the first sawmills appeared along its banks. They were modest things at first, water-powered, then steam-driven, buzzing through logs hauled down from the north. Word spread quickly that money grew on trees here, and the men came to claim it. The work began in winter, deep in the woods, in camps far from any town. Lumberjacks felled the great pines with axe and crosscut saw, their breath freezing in the cold. The logs were dragged across the snow to the frozen riverbanks, stacked in mountains, and left waiting for the thaw. When spring came, the rivers swelled and the great drives began. Thousands of logs were rolled into the current, a churning brown flood of timber riding the meltwater downstream. Rivermen in spiked boots danced across the moving logs, breaking jams, risking their lives in the icy rush. It was dangerous, beautiful, deadly work. Where the logs ended their journey, Muskegon was waiting. By the 1870s, the river was so choked with timber that a man could cross from bank to bank by stepping from log to log. Holding booms pennied them in by the millions, each marked with its owner's stamp, like cattle branded for the slaughter. Then the mills took over. At the height of the boom, dozens of sawmills lined the lake and river, their blades screaming day and night. They turned whole forests into lumber, lath, and shingles. The air was thick with the perfume of cut pine and the constant golden snow of sawdust. They called it the Sawdust City, and the name was earned. Sawdust filled the streets, leveled the marshes, and built up the very ground people walked upon. The whine of the saws never stopped, the smoke never cleared. Fortunes were made in a single season and lost just as fast. The wealth was staggering. Muskegon's lumber barons built grand mansions on the bluffs, palaces of carved oak and stained glass, monuments to the pine that made them rich. Charles Hackley, the greatest of them, grew so wealthy that he gave libraries, parks, and schools back to the town. His generosity still shapes the city today. Down below the mansions, the town roared with life. Saloons and boarding houses crowded the waterfront, packed with mill hands, sailors, and lumberjacks fresh from the woods with a winter's wages to spend. Schooners crowded the harbor, their holds heavy with lumber. It sailed south to Chicago and beyond, rebuilding the city after its great fire and raising new towns across the treeless plains. For a few glorious decades, Muskegon helped build a nation out of its forests. The pine of Michigan became the floors of farmhouses in Iowa, the storefronts of Kansas, the rafters of 1,000 prairie churches. The trees that had grown for centuries crossed the lake and rose again as homes. An entire frontier was framed in Muskegon pine. But a forest is not endless after all. The cutting that seemed eternal had a quiet, relentless arithmetic. Each season, the lumberjacks traveled farther north to find the pine, and each season there was less of it to find. The green sea was being drained, one log at a time. By the 1890s, the great white pine was nearly gone. The hills that had once been dark with timber lay bare and stumped, scarred by fire and erosion. The river drives dwindled, then ceased. One by one, the screaming saws fell silent, and the mills stood empty against the lake wind. What followed was a reckoning. A town built entirely on lumber suddenly had no lumber left to cut. Many feared Muskegon would simply fade away, another ghost left behind by a vanished resource. Some lumber towns did exactly that, dying with the last log that floated past. But Muskegon refused to disappear. With money raised from the very barons the pine had made wealthy, the city lured factories and foundries to its shores. The sawmills gave way to engines and machines. The lumberjacks' sons became factory men. A new century brought a different kind of work to the old harbor. And slowly, quietly, the forests returned. Over 100 years, Second-growth woods crept back across the ruined hills, softer and younger than the giants that came before. The river runs clear now, where logs once jammed it shut. Where mills once roared, families walked the lakeshore at sunset. Today the boom survives mostly in memory, in the mansions on the bluff, in a museum's faded photographs, in the very ground still laced with century-old sawdust. The white pine that built America is gone, but its ghost lingers in the wistful name. This was the sawdust city, where a forest became a nation and then quietly slipped away.